Somewhere in between chess and sneaker collecting is the Pokemon TCG. It's a strategy game with collectibles. But today I want to ask if the game is based entirely upon luck. I think everyone who's played the Pokemon TCG knows that your opening 7 cards and the 6 cards that you prize play a huge role in how your game goes. Of course, it's not all luck, because a seasoned player can take a bad hand and make it competitive. And a big part of the game is playing your way out of a bad hand and finding a sequence where it looks like there isn't one. But still, when it really comes down to it, we can't deny that there is a big element of luck. Just take a look at the recent EUIC, the European International Championship event, one of the biggest tournaments of the year. And it came down to Cloth versus Dragapult. And as we know, Cloth won, and it won not only based on luck, but it did get lucky in the fact that the opponent opened with 1 Dreepy, and that 1 Dreepy is within range of being poisoned and donked on the first turn by Cloth. So in a way, it comes down to if the Dragapult player opens with a strong enough hand as to avoid the donk and get the game going. If they can, maybe they can win. In order of importance, I think the game comes down to 3 factors. The first is card choice. That is the most important. The second is luck, the second most important. And the third is strategy or play, the third most important. While there is a big element of luck, especially in your opening hand, card choice comes before that, because what you choose to put in your deck are the cards that you're going to draw into. So even though we could say that the EUIC Championship Cloth deck won because of luck, it actually won because of card choice. The Cloth deck is a carefully crafted stack of 60 cards that is looking for that turn 1 win. And it knows that it can do this, especially against a deck like Dragapult. And it knew that Dragapult was going to be a major deck at that tournament. So Cloth was an excellent choice. But of course, if the player opposite the Cloth deck is playing cards that are above 80 HP and opens with more than 1, then it becomes impossible to get the turn 1 donk. So you can see the interplay of card choice versus luck. The third is strategy or play, and even though I'm putting this last, it is still extremely important, and I think that it rivals luck. Because as I said before, a good player will be able to find their way out of a bad hand or a bad board state. And there's so many little micro decisions that are made throughout the game, and one misplay can completely undo a strong board state. However, when I compare Pokemon TCG to, say, a game like chess, in chess, there's absolutely no luck. You might get lucky if your opponent blunders, but that still comes down to their play. But would it be possible to create a Pokemon TCG game that did not rely at all on luck and came down only to card choice and strategy? Well, in thinking about this problem, I sort of realized that there's one card, an ace spec, that stands out as one of the strongest cards in the game, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So, how could we remove luck from Pokemon TCG? Well, we would have to change the mechanic of drawing 7 random cards as your starting hand. Drawing into 7 random cards as your opening hand is far too unpredictable. It's one of the parts of the game that I sort of don't like, actually. Now, I accept it because that's how the game is played, but it's unfortunate because you could have a really strong player with a great deck that just opens with a terrible hand against an opponent that opens with a very good hand, and they're at an immediate disadvantage. It's like if in chess, there were no pieces on the board, and instead, each player had to pull out 7 random pieces from a bag and put them on the board. And then as the game progressed, they'd have to take out 1 more chess piece each turn and add it to the board. So in order to make a game that's fair, we'd have to start with a board state similar to chess, where the pieces are already there. My suggestion for this would be, instead of drawing 7 random cards, you instead choose your starting hand. For example, you could select 6 cards, put them in your hand, and then shuffle your deck and begin the game. Now there's still an element of luck because you have to draw into your next card, which is unknown. But at least then you have an opening state that you can control. People could craft different openings for different decks. If everyone started with selected cards rather than random cards, there'd be no way to blame a bad game on a bad opening hand. I think the element of chance and probability is a core component of the game, and so you wouldn't want to remove that altogether. You could start with 5, shuffle the deck, and then draw 2 random cards, so you have 5 selected and 2 random. There's any number of ways to change the game, but what I'm getting at is that starting with a select board state rather than a random one, I think would make the game a little bit more interesting. Now, this would also remove other game mechanics, like, for example, the way that Cloth has been built to create that turn 1 donk. That would sort of be out of the question now, because nobody would start in such a weak position as to make that possible. There's no telling what kind of decks would be created, because there might be some that are created in such a way as to create turn 2 or turn 3 wins, or checkmates that happen almost immediately. Still, I think this sort of crafting of sequences and lines from a select board state would be very interesting and beneficial for the game. But that's not going to happen, because I'm not a game engineer at Pokemon, and even if I was, I probably wouldn't have the power to completely change the game like that. But in thinking about this concept, I sort of realized that there's one card that stands out among other A-specs, and that is Precious Trolley. Since it came out, Precious Trolley has seen a bunch of wins. Most recently, at the Fukuoka Champions League, it was the A-spec in Feraligatr. At EUIC, it was the A-spec in the first place Terapagos. At the regional in Birmingham, it was in the 10th place Gardevoir. And at the Champions League in Osaka just a few months ago, it was in the 14th place Gardevoir. At the regional Stuttgart, it was in the 4th place Gardevoir. And at the regional in San Antonio, it was in the 3rd place Pidgeot Control deck. Also at the San Antonio, in the first place Gardevoir played by Henry Child, there was Secret Box, which I think sort of parallels Precious Trolley in some ways, but I'll focus on Precious Trolley for now. What's so good about Precious Trolley is that if you get into it right away, and the decks that play it are built to get that card on the first or second turn, it immediately sets up your board state, and now you can start using resources for other things. You don't have to set up your board state as you go. You pull out all your Pokemon. That also thins your deck. Then you can start building. You can start attaching tools, energy. You can start Ultra Balling for evolution Pokemon. You don't have to worry about going Poffin for Nest Ball. You don't have to spend resources to get resources that pull out Pokemon. You just pull them all out at once. And in so many decks, these Pokemon have synergy with each other. They provide abilities that make them function. Some are attackers, some are sub-attackers like a Munkidori, some find you cards from the deck, others provide a wall to hide behind. But having them all at once means that you can start progressing and increase the tempo of your play faster than your opponent, hopefully. So I think Precious Trolley uses this concept that I'm getting at about starting the game with a select group of cards and going from there. Now, the Secret Box, which I was saying before, sort of parallels Trolley, is interesting because it does a similar thing in that it finds you an item, a supporter, a Pokemon, and a stadium. That basically gives you all the cards you need to create your ideal sequence. Now, of course, there's some decks that just can't use Precious Trolley. They might rely on Prime Catcher, or they might rely on something else for setting up an endgame checkmate. Recently, I've seen Heroes Mount having more play in that when you attach it to one of your Pokemon and increase it by 100 HP, it makes it almost impossible for your opponent to get a knockout on the last turn to close out the game, and it gives you an extra turn or two to knock out theirs. But still, I'm a huge fan of Precious Trolley, and I think it's one of the best A-specs, and I think almost any deck can be rebuilt to function with Precious Trolley. The only real problem is that you almost have to play Arven. Post-rotation, there's no Irida, so Arven is the only supporter that can grab an item card, which Trolley is. If your deck is not playing tools, it seems a bit of a waste to put Arven in the deck. Now, in the case of the Gardevoir decks that play Trolley, they're also increasing their ability to get Arven by adding Call Bell. So look how many cards you're dedicating to get into that Trolley right away. That's how important it is. Trolley Gardevoir is the first deck that I've felt is super consistent for me and that I feel confident with in almost any matchup. I've had a huge win ratio with Trolley Gardevoir on PTCGL, and I've never been able to achieve that with any other deck. When I play it with this card, I feel like I know exactly what I have to do and I don't spend any time making tough decisions. All the decisions come naturally. In the first 2 turns, I know exactly what I need to do. And then once I'm set up, I know exactly what I need to do from there. And after playing it so much, I've really gotten comfortable with how the mid game and how the end game looks. And with Gardevoir, it offers you so many options for endgame scenarios because you have such an array of attackers. The only thing that can really go wrong with Gardevoir at the end is if Gardevoir is knocked out too early and you have no way to get it back. I think Feraligatr is one of the best examples of how Precious Trolley proved how strong it is. Because when Feraligatr was first being played, I saw it mostly being played with Grand Tree or with Prime Catcher. Prime Catcher doesn't really make a lot of sense. Because of the attacking ability that the Stage 1 Croconaw has, you're able to hit and run, so it's pretty easy to move Pokemon in and out of the active. However, it is a deck that wants to attack specific Pokemon, so I could see why having extra Gust is useful. If Relicanth isn't on the board, or you don't have a rescue board for your Mimikyu, having a Prime Catcher to switch Pokemon seems like it could be useful. The other aspect that was being used when this deck was first being constructed was Grand Tree, and it makes sense because you need to get evolved from Totodile into Croconaw and Feraligatr quite quickly. Not being able to get to Feraligatr is one of the main problems this deck has. However, Precious Trolley solves that in an interesting way. It allows you to set up your board completely. It allows you to get all of the Munkidori that you need on the board right away, along with the Totodile and Relicanth. So all you have to do next is start evolving. And you can do that typically with TM Evolution, which is a tool that can also be grabbed with Arven that you're using to get the Precious Trolley. So any deck that can benefit from evolving with TM Evolution can benefit probably also from Precious Trolley. Before finalizing this video, I thought a little bit more about the question, is Pokemon TCG like chess? Or is it more like a game of chance? I think that the aspect about Pokemon TCG that is like chess is in the card choice and deck building. In this analysis I've been doing of Precious Trolley, I realized that even though it is a really powerful card, it can't simply be forced into just any deck. It has to have synergy with the other cards. The true skill in the Pokemon TCG is creating synergy with your cards and understanding the full potential and all the different permutations and possible sequences that those cards offer. In this regard, Cloth is sort of a masterpiece. I'm not going to analyze the deck here, but if you're not familiar with it, check out the winning EUIC list. I think that this deck was only possible because of the huge pool of cards to choose from, ranging from the Pokemon V era to the recent Terrastal EX era. It feels like a deck that hacks the game itself, and I wonder if the game engineers ever imagined that such a deck would be possible. From a casual perspective, the Pokemon TCG seems relatively simple and mostly based on chance. But as you continue to watch high-level play, and you notice that a lot of the same players are winning the top spots, and you look closer at how they're actually playing the game, you realize how deep it really goes. And I start to wonder if a player is really justified in blaming their loss on a bad hand. There's an element of luck that I think the Pokemon TCG cannot escape. However, when you dig down a little bit deeper, you realize that the game is about understanding probabilities and creating your own luck.